So it'll be interesting to see the outcome of that conference. But joining me in the studio, like you mentioned earlier, is Kayode Akindele, partner at 46 Parallel, to give us some perspective on a market that seems to be struggling right now. Kayode, I mean, your thoughts on what we're seeing. We've seen most of full year earnings season pretty much play out now, but clearly there have been quite a number of surprises. It hasn't been a spark for the market just yet. People are now talking about Q1 numbers. Do you think that might be the spark?
I don't think numbers are going to be a spark for this market. There's no confidence or low confidence in the market until certain issues such as the brokers and market confidence in the market improves. You're not going to see investors rushing in. For example, the whole unseemly row between SEC and the House of Reps committee doesn't help in the confidence market. No.
All right, but let's come back to the numbers. ETI putting out numbers yesterday, 57% improvement in net income. I think very positive. We know that clearly Nigeria is a big part of what they're doing with the deal that they did for Oceanic Bank last year. Many people point to the fact that that may have been a bit expensive. Your thought on the numbers and where they go from here?
Onto show the breakdown, it'll be interesting to see how the Nigerian operation how much Nigerian operations contributed to those numbers. ETI has definitely been a big play with buying Oceanic. Nigeria is the biggest market, and it takes them to the top tier in the Nigerian market. I think they needed to do something, and so they were willing to pay a premium for that.
The deal was on the table, they took it.
Exactly. I mean, and if you look at ETI in terms of African banks, has probably one of the widest networks in sub-Saharan Africa. And that tie-up with Nedbank in their cooperation agreement gives them access to Southern Africa as well as the expertise and skills that Nedbank Capital Markets has. So it puts them in a strong position with a very strong platform. And it'll be good to see how they bed down the acquisition of Oceanic.
Or is that stock you think you should be buying now? More so when you consider the Oceanic play?
I think it is. I think if you look at the sub-Saharan Africa is really the toast of investors at the moment, especially in the frontier markets. ETI gives you probably the best platform across over 30 sub-Saharan African countries. That tie up with Nedbank provides access to Southern Africa as well. So I think it's definitely one to buy.
And meanwhile, Union Bank releasing 59 billion loss. I mean, clearly one of the rescued banks. So the cleanup obviously has continued into 2011. Looking ahead, 2012, they now have new investors. Where do you see this bank going?
I'm very surprised at that level of loss. I mean, it could have been worse if you look at the deferred tax of about 25 billion they put in. It would mean over 80 billion. Now, the question is, I mean, they made a small profit in 2010. So what happened in 2011 that they seem to have gone backwards a big way? Now, for the new investors, it's probably a bit scary looking at those kind of figures. And it shows there's a long way to go because it's supposed to be a transformation. So I think the new investors have a lot of work to do. There's going to be need a lot of investment, especially in the Union Bank's infrastructure, especially the IT infrastructure, which is below standard compared to most of the other Nigerian banks. So I think it's quite a daunting task for them. All
right. So if the broader market is not going to move up, clearly there are some that have been moving in the right direction. I interviewed the CEO of Unilever yesterday. That stock has outperformed the market by a wide margin over the last 1 year. This year has done pretty well as well. Which stock should we be looking at in your view?
In my view, I'll be looking at stocks like Unilever, Nestle. They're doing very well in the market. They've done very well in the last 2 or 3 years. The food and fast consumer section is doing quite very well. Dangote Cement still is a stock I like as well. In terms of infrastructure play, there's going to be a lot of cement. Dangote Cement seems to be reaching, I think by next year, they're going to have about 40 million metric tons, which will make them probably the biggest supplier, one of the biggest suppliers in Africa in terms of that. So Dangote Cement is definitely a stock I'm looking at as well. And then probably in terms of the financial sector, we're still looking at GTBs, the first banks, because, I mean, and Zenith. Those banks have performed well, even in the downturn. And they seem, as the Nigerian economy shapes up, the financial sector improves, they should do better.
I was just going to ask you that, don't you like any of the financial plays? More so because many people have talked about that's where the value is in the market. Do you agree with that? Or do you think the risk, when you compare the valuations for the risk you're taking, that perhaps prices of banks are where they should be right now?
I think the valuations, some of them are a bit undervalued, but if you look at the financial sector, where do you even see growth? In most developing and developed markets, it's normally consumer finance and mortgages that most banks make most of their money. We don't have a very large consumer finance market in Nigeria, and we don't have a big mortgage market. So banks are normally in the high-end corporate sector, which is overbanked, and so margins there are wafer thin. And if you look at other areas of the market, FX trading and some bond trading, that's where banks are making most of their money. So for long-term growth, until we develop a mortgage market, develop consumer finance, I can't see the banks growing that fast in that sense.
All right, Kayode, I want you to gaze into crystal ball right now. I want you to name one stock you think is the play for this year? You've talked about Dangote Cement, you've talked a bit about the financials, talked about the consumer plays. If I was to pick one stock, which one would it be for you?
That's quite a hard question. If I was going to pick one stock to look at, to be honest, the stock I would probably look at is probably Nigerian Breweries or Nestle PLC.